Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Elie Honig back with us. We'll chat with Elie in just a moment, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and to be notified every time we post a new episode. So Elie Honig is CNN's senior legal analyst. He previously worked for 14 years as a federal and state prosecutor. He is also the national best-selling author of 2 books, Hatchet Man, How Bill Barr Broke the Prosecutor's Code and Corrupted the Justice Department, and Untouchable, How Powerful People Get Away with It. He writes a weekly column for New York Magazine and for Cafe.com, and he hosts 2 podcasts for Vox Media. He teaches at Rutgers University and is special counsel to New Jersey law firm Lowenstein Sandler. His latest book is When You Come at the King, Inside DOJ's Pursuit of the President from Nixon to Trump. Elie, welcome back into the back room.
Great to see you, Andy. I'm a full-on regular now, right?
You're in double digits, man.
I might be the all-time leader. I might be like the Steve Martin of SNL kind of thing.
You have the bathrobe. We're going to have to get you like slippers to go with the bathrobe or something.
It's the only logical next step.
All right, we're on it. Let's start with Iran for a moment. Just from a legal standpoint, this really feels like a war. Donald Trump has called it a war. Pete Hegseth has called it a war. They're prosecuting it like a war. But is it an illegal war? Is this an unauthorized, unconstitutional war?
It's probably illegal, but, and there's a big but here, there's no court or lawsuit that's going to be able to do anything about it. So let me break that down into 2 parts. First of all, the reason you were hearing in those early days, the administration was sort of wrestling with, do we call it a war? No, it's an excursion. Yes, it's a war. No, it's not a war. It's because if it's a capital W war, and I think this meets any reasonable definition of it, you're supposed to go to Congress to get authorization. Used to be a formal declaration of war up until World War II. Since then, we've used what's called an AUMF, an authorization of the use of military force. The most recent one was in 01 and then 02 after 9/11. In the absence of that, there may be some argument that the president has this inherent Article 2 executive power to defend the United States against imminent threats. And this is why you heard all this imminency language. But there's a question as to whether it was truly imminent, meaning like somebody's about to get killed immediately. And even if there was an imminent threat, here we are a month in, and he still hasn't gone to Congress, and he's not going to Congress, and that's clear. So by the book, yes, they should have gone to Congress, or what prior presidents did was they linked their actions back to older authorizations of use of military force. That 01-02 force was used as late as Joe Biden to justify certain military actions or strikes. So it got stretched. But Trump's not even attempting to do that. He's not even attempting to stretch. He's just saying, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But there's no lawsuit in the country that will order the commander in chief to stop using military force. So people say, well, what can be done? The answer is there's only political solutions. And what do I mean by that? I mean a few things. One, the public. Trump sees public polling data. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he does. Protests, voting, and even if not for the candidate himself, in the midterms and primaries and some of these interim elections we've seen, there's the markets. The markets exercise influence, right? You see the Dow and the S&P. You see what's happening to the price of oil and gas. And then most directly, there's Congress, which has, of course, the power to investigate, to subpoena, to hold hearings, to pass legislation, and to impeach, but isn't interested in doing really much, if any of that. So the answer here, if there's an answer, has to be political and not so much lawsuit-based or legal.
You mentioned the stock market, and a lot of people, myself included, feel like there's some market manipulation going on here. You were a former prosecutor. You prosecuted organized crime, this kind of stuff. When he comes out on a Monday morning, when he checks the futures like everybody else and says, oh, the market's going to tank, let me throw out some positive news. And so that we get these gyrations, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, up, down, up, down. We see it again today. So the market looks like it's going to react today to what he apparently said to his staff, like, let's just get out of Iran and screw the Strait of Hormuz. Like, does this smell like market manipulation to you? And I think yesterday I heard that there are people that are close to him who have had trades timed like almost precisely to the hour before news has been released.
Right. See, that's what you would need to prove. You need to prove that somebody had material non-public information and traded on it. If once you and I are hearing it, it's no longer non-public.
Right.
But if there's people behind the scenes and you can prove that they're trading based on that, and it gets a little more complicated where you're talking about government officials who aren't supposed to be trading at all under ethics rules. This is why we have these ethics rules, but everyone sort of ignores them. Then yeah, there could be an issue. And another issue, Andy, related to that is growing in a totally unregulated way is these poly markets, whether it's Kalshi or poly market. I mean, you see all sorts of evidence that people with inside information of government actions, of military actions, of law enforcement actions, of diplomatic actions are going onto these, exchanges, I guess they're called, and placing large bets on things that then happened shortly after. There was stuff around Venezuela, there's stuff around Iran. These are completely unregulated at this point, and they're not regulated the way that normal betting would be. They're certainly not regulated the way the stock market should be. And I co-host, I fill in for Michael Smerconish here and there on Sirius XM, and his question the other day, question of the day that I inherited was, should it be illegal for people to place bets on these sites about governmental and military actions? And my first thought was sort of like, hands off government. But then I was like, well, what good comes of this? Only bad comes of this. It only creates bad incentives for decision makers and policymakers and people in government. And it's only subject really to manipulation. So I'm not a fan of government regulation as a whole, but I don't see any reason to allow that kind of betting.
Let's switch subjects. This week, there's going to be a hearing taking place at the Supreme Court on birthright citizenship. Just for some context, Trump, on his first day last year, issued an executive order. The order was called Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship, which is kind of ironic. This would effectively ban birthright citizenship for the babies of undocumented immigrants, which has been a guarantee of the 14th Amendment for almost 160 years. Yep. Where do you see this eventually coming down?
Well, let me give you my bottom line. I think Trump's going to lose, and I think it's going to be 7-2 against him. And I have a piece out with New York Magazine on Tuesday, the day before the argument, and then I'll be covering it with CNN. So the 14th Amendment ratified in 1868 in the wake of the Civil War. The idea was to ensure citizenship for the children of freed Black slaves and to overturn the Dred Scott decision, which basically said Black people who live here are not citizens. The 14th Amendment says any person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and we'll come back to that in a second, is a citizen. Now, for 157 years or so, that's been generally understood to mean that if you're born here, you are a citizen with certain very, very narrow exceptions. For example, if it's a child of a foreign diplomat, if it's a child of an invading foreign army, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, it didn't matter whether your parents were here legally, illegal, temporary status, permanent status, you were a citizen. Trump, in his first day in office, as you mentioned, Andy, comes in. He doesn't quite try to end birthright. You'll see sloppy reporting saying end birthright. No, what he's trying to do is gut it. And his executive order says basically, well, you don't get automatic citizenship if the parent is here illegally or on temporary status. And by the way, temporary status would include someone here on a work visa, on a special occupation visa, a scientist or a specialist, someone here on a student visa, someone who has DACA protections, deferred action against childhood dreamers protections. All these people would then, if the parents were in one of those statuses, the child no longer becomes a citizen. Now, Trump has lost every single case so far on his interpretation of birthright citizenship. He has lost 4 different cases in 4 different federal districts, including cases where judges appointed to the bench by conservatives, by Ronald Reagan, have rejected him. And then 3 separate courts of appeals have left those rulings in place. So far, Trump is batting 0-0-0 on his interpretation. Let me lay out, though, what Trump's argument is, right? Because a lot of people say, well, it's right there on the face of the 14th Amendment. It's mostly right there on the face of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment doesn't quite say everyone born here is a citizen here. It has that subject to the jurisdiction thereof language. And what Trump's team is arguing, and I think they'll lose, and they have lost so far, is, well, if the parents are natives and citizens of another country, so let's say Ecuador, and then they come here and have a child, they're subject to the jurisdiction of Ecuador. But the problem is but they're also obviously subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Can a person from Ecuador who's here illegally or on temporary status be arrested? You bet. Be prosecuted by the U.S.? You bet. Be taxed by the U.S., be regulated, ticketed, questioned, all the other different things that the federal government does? Of course. And so
and by this administration.
Of course, by this. I mean, I say in my article, imagine a scenario where a DEA or an ICE agent stops somebody and says, sir, you're under arrest. And the person says, sorry, man, I'm from Ecuador. I'm not subject to your jurisdiction. Just go ask your president, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's ridiculous, and it wouldn't work in any other context. So the better argument is a person in the situation we laid out is subject to the jurisdiction, yes, sure, of Ecuador, but yes, to the United States. I mean, now the very simple analogy that I use in the piece, I'll adopt it here. So like I'm holding my phone in this hand and I'm holding a water bottle in this hand. Like, am I holding a water bottle? Yeah. The phone doesn't cancel out the water bottle. This would be subject to the jurisdiction of the US. This would be subject to the jurisdiction of Ecuador. So if you are two things, you are also one of those things. And that's why I think Trump is going to lose.
And you said 7-2. Are you talking Thomas and Alito?
You got it. Yeah. I closed the article by saying the only suspense left is it going to be 7-2 or 9-0? I don't know. I mean, Thomas and Alito are so dug in to their to just conservative and largely Trumpian positions. So, but yeah, I think the three liberals, and I think Roberts, Barrett, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh will all join the liberals. Maybe even one of them won't. Maybe Gorsuch won't. But Trump's not. I mean, I would be shocked if Trump wins this one.
So the strict constructionists are all for reinterpreting and rewriting the Constitution.
Well, and giving it a completely illogical spin, right? I mean, like, yeah, you are still subject to anyone who's physically here in the. And by the way, one of the things that they say is, well, subject to the jurisdiction of must exclude somebody, right? It is in there, and it doesn't say anybody is a citizen. But the answer is what I said before. Yeah, meaning the children of a foreign diplomat is not subject to the jurisdiction. The children of an invading army, and there's some Native American. It's a little complicated, but some situations where certain Native Americans might not be subject. But that's all it's ever been understood to mean historically, and that's almost certainly correct.
Let's talk about Epstein and Pam Bondi and her subpoena. Earlier this month, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed Attorney General Pam Bondi. There's been much speculation over whether or not she's going to show up to testify. And on the 18th, in what seemed like an end run around the subpoena, she voluntarily met privately with committee members. Democrats were outraged. Is their anger justified? And
my gosh.
And I know you have some questions about what you would ask Bondi.
Well, Pam Bondi, look, yes, anger and frustration from Pam Bondi is justified from both sides. It's not just Democrats. So you could see this coming immediately because Bondi, let's go back. She has her disastrous Capitol Hill testimony back in early March, right? Or February, whatever it was. It was a few weeks ago where she's ranting and raving and she's got her insult book and she's not answering any questions and she's lecturing us about the Dow is 5,000 and 50,000, whatever. And
$50,000.
$50,000. So you can buy it if you have enough in your account. And it's just a complete disaster. There's reporting that the White House was not pleased with her performance. It became this viral meme, that kind of thing. Then she gets a subpoena from the Oversight Committee. By the way, a bipartisan subpoena issued with support from, I think, 5 Republicans. So that gave them a majority, issued by a Republican-led committee. And now Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche love to praise themselves for being the most transparent DOJ in history ever. And so what would you expect, Andy, from the most transparent DOJ ever when they get a subpoena? They would go, sure. I mean, that's what we do. We're all about transparency. See you on April 14th, the scheduled date for the hearing. Instead, the initial statement out of DOJ moments later is that the subpoena is, quote, completely unnecessary. And then they try what you, I think, aptly called this end run, where they just say, well, how about she just drops in and gives us a quick briefing? So the day after the subpoena, there's this ridiculous session where Bondi shows up. There's no rules. There's no court reporter. There's no videotape. There's no under oath. And she's like, I'm here to answer questions. Democrats aren't having it. They essentially, we don't know. There's all these conflicting because it wasn't recorded, but basically all hell breaks loose. Democrats say this is bullcrap. Republicans say, well, she's here to answer your questions instead of the subpoena. They don't say that part. It falls apart. Everyone storms out. And now it's clear to me that Bondi, well, I wouldn't say 100% clear, but I would not be surprised if Bondi just no-shows on the 14th. And her position is, I showed up for that other thing. That should suffice. So get ready for a little bit of a dispute over this. And if I was a member of Congress of that committee, I would ask her explicitly, are you showing up on the 14th or not? Are we going to have a court case? Are we going to have potential contempt hearings here? Or are you going to actually show up? And I think that remains to be seen. But my spidey sense is telling me she's going to defy that subpoena. And then we'll see if the House holds her in contempt. I don't know whether they will or not. But the thing is, Andy, if they do hold her in contempt, then it gets referred over to the United States Department of Justice, which is helmed by Pam Bondi. She's certainly not going to indict herself. And by the way, I should say, no AG had ever been held in contempt for the first 230 years of this country. But then Eric Holder got held in contempt, didn't charge himself over Fast and Furious. Bill Barr got held in contempt, of course, didn't charge himself. That was actually not over Mueller. That was over the citizenship question on the census. And then Merrick Garland got held in contempt and did not indict himself either. So this is becoming, sadly, a ritual now.
I think from a political standpoint, which is not your wheelhouse, as you always like to remind me, justifiably so, I think within MAGA especially, it would be horrible in terms of optics if she refused to show. But let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Let's say she shows. What would you ask her?
Oh my gosh, she has so many questions that she needs to answer. So first of all, is anyone actually being investigated? Are you, DOJ, actually criminally investigating anyone? It's pretty clear the answer is no. She and Blanche have given sort of mixed answers. Basically, what the best I can glean is Blanche likes to say, of course, we're investigating to the ends of the earth. Based on all that we have so far, there's nothing there, but we are ready if anyone has information. So waiting for the phone to ring with a magical tip is not exactly investigating. So that's number one. Number two, are you done? Have you turned over all the documents or not? We kept getting more and more, and they kept saying, well, this is most of them. There's more. This is some of them. There's more. Are you done? Have you turned them all over? Number three, who was accountable for failing to redact out the victim identifying information, the names and other information, which they were furious about? Who did that? Was that you, Pam Bondi? Who's accountable? Was anybody punished? Was anybody disciplined? Was anybody reprimanded, educated, whatever? Number four, and this is a big one. The law says, the actual Epstein Files Transparency Act says, you cannot withhold or redact information because it might cause a person embarrassment or political damage. Yet there's many examples where names are redacted out for obviously that reason. There's emails where somebody, we don't know who, is emailing Epstein about the girls. Oh, bring the girls, which girl? I'm paraphrasing here, but what did you think of this girl? And we don't know who those people are because their names are blacked out when they should not be. Those are all questions I would have. I also would ask, one more, sorry. The law also says you're not allowed to withhold, DOJ is not allowed to withhold documents that show internal deliberative process within DOJ. So prosecution memos and 302s, which are FBI write-ups and emails from one prosecutor to another. And it appears as if DOJ has withheld many of those. They've just sort of decided that they want to, so they will. So Pam Bondi, all of these questions have not been answered. I'm increasingly skeptical they ever will be.
Yeah. And, this harkens back to what you said earlier about prosecuting an illegal war. You said who would hold them accountable for it, right? Yep. Well, the same holds true here. And it's really across the board in this administration. Not only did the Supreme Court give Trump virtual absolute immunity to basically do whatever the hell he wants, but who's going to prosecute, who's going to investigate anything this administration does because of what kind of thing you're saying with the Department of Justice, the FBI. But it segues to a different subject, albeit related, which we're starting to hear a lot of, is these lawsuits or these settlements, like the latest one is Flynn.
Michael Flynn. Yeah.
Right? And so when you think about the Proud Boys have a suit for like up to $100 million, when you think about Donald Trump's own request for, if somebody sues and then Trump says to the DOJ, settle, even if it's involving him, who is holding all that shit accountable?
Nobody.
It's insane.
Yeah, nobody. And if people are just wondering what this is, it's as if it's not bad enough that we had all these pardons and drop prosecutions. There is a law that allows people who've been essentially cleared or who've been prosecuted and had cases dismissed. Technically, these cases would fit, right? Michael Flynn, his case was dismissed or whatever, to then sue for damages. Now, it's up to DOJ whether they want to agree to a payment or make the person then take them to court. obviously what's happening here is DOJ is paying out and Trump's request is still pending. Trump says, I'm not going to be involved in my request. I'm going to leave that to DOJ. But I mean, this type of a payout has to be approved by the top tiers of DOJ up to the Deputy Attorney General. So what do you think? Todd Blanche is going to go, no, deny that to make him sue us? Absolutely not. They're going to, he's reaching into essentially his own pocket. I mean, I understand it's Donald Trump, the private individual asking for payment from the government. But I mean, all of this is further to the narrative that these cases were wrongful when mostly they were not. Some of them, there's things you could criticize. And then to pay people out on top of it. And there's no way to stop that, Andy. There's no lawsuit that can be brought by you or me or even members of Congress successfully to say, whatever amount was paid to Michael Flynn, we don't know this, we may come out at some point, or whatever amount they pay to Donald Trump, that needs to be returned to the government. Like, that's just, there's no suit for that. This is up to the federal government, and they're recognizing this, and it's become a feeding trough.
Let's talk about Tish James, the object of Trump's obsessive, retributive or selective prosecution, whatever you want to call it, New York State Attorney General. She was hit recently with 2 federal criminal referrals alleging she may have committed homeowners insurance fraud instead of mortgage fraud. Trump obviously is hell-bent on taking her down on some legal level. What do you make of this latest attempt to target one of his biggest opponents?
So, and I say this as somebody who's been very critical of Letitia James, you know this. However, the attempts to indict her and re-indict her and re-indict her are ridiculous, have rightly failed so far. I don't know what it's going to take for them to get the message, right? And let's just recap the history here. Trump tweets back, or Truth Socials back in September, hey, DOJ, hey, Pam, I'm paraphrasing, what's taking so long? I want to see Letitia James and Jim Comey and Adam Schiff indicted. Pam Bondi responds, basically, we're on it, boss. They indict Letitia James and Jim Comey, and a judge throws both of those out because the U.S. attorneys on those cases were improperly appointed. So Letitia James gets indicted, thrown out by a judge. Then they try to re-indict her, and the grand jury rejects it, which is really hard to do, to have a grand jury reject you. Then they try again with a different grand jury, which again rejects it. So to go 0 for 2 in the grand jury for prosecutors is like, you know, like rolling snake eyes twice in a row. It's more than that, probably. And now they still determined. And now we get this new referral from this attack dog, Bill Pulte, who's over at the Federal Housing Finance Agency. He's basically just going through people's mortgage files looking for any discrepancy. And honestly, I don't know whether Letitia James committed mortgage fraud or not. It seems like a shaky case to me at best from what we've seen. But the point is, you've lost so many times, and judges and multiple grand juries have spoken, and they're never going to convict her. They're never going to convict her. They're never going to convict Jim Comey. They're never going to convict Mark Kelly or Alyssa Slotkin. The question is just how many times do they want to step on the same rake and get hit in the face by the handle?
Yeah, and these referrals are, I believe, are about insurance fraud, but you don't think like just changing the type of fraud changes the overall?
Like enough people see what's going on here. This is why grand juries are rejecting these cases. There was reporting that the Mark Kelly case, because Trump tried to indict, or not, Jeannie Pirro specifically, tried to indict Mark Kelly for that video he made telling military members that they can reject illegal orders. The reporting is the grand jury was 0 to 23, unanimous against, which is, I think, a first. I'm sure it's not, but you know, it's virtually a first in U.S. history. So grand juries know what's going on. They see what's going on. And I don't think, I mean, unless you have a really just incredibly overwhelmingly clear case, even then you might still have a problem, because grand juries and juries nullify sometimes. Sometimes they just say, I don't really care what the evidence is. Enough is enough.
Pirro was pretty venomous and outraged after that.
That was wild.
What did you make of that?
Well, first of all, if you've seen the Cecily Strong impression of her it's spot on, right, on Saturday Night Live. That was crazy. So what that was Jeannie Pirro, again, in a political vendetta, is is criminally investigating Jerome Powell over cost overruns on these renovations to buildings at the Fed. Cost overruns, it's definitely over cost, but there's no evidence of fraud. And Jeannie Pirro issued subpoenas to the Fed for financial documents, and the Fed challenged it, and a federal judge, James Boasberg, quashed those subpoenas, which is rare, but it definitely happens if you're look, prosecutors have a lot of range when it comes to subpoenas. You can subpoena based on almost anything, based on very little evidence, very little suspicion, but you can't subpoena based on zero, and you can't subpoena based on bad motives. And in Judge Boasberg's opinion, he shows this is obviously politically driven. There's obviously bad motives. He says there's a mountain of evidence that this is politically driven and zero evidence of a crime. Therefore, I'm blocking these subpoenas. And then Jeannie Pirro calls a press conference to have a public temper tantrum. I mean, I've never seen a U.S. attorney or an AG call a press conference to just vent about a ruling. Usually when you see a press conference is to announce an indictment, announce an arrest, maybe to talk about a verdict or a sentence, but never just to say, I want to go on a rampage. And she just went on a rampage and was full of falsehood. She said this was a liberal activist judge. I mean, this is a judge who was first put on the bench by George W. Bush, later promoted by Obama. This is a judge who actually sided with Trump in 2017 when everyone was trying to get his tax returns. This judge said, no, you don't have a legal basis for that. So he's not some activist. Pirro said it was the first time ever a judge has blocked a subpoena. That's BS. Judges, I mean, it happens. It's rare, but it certainly happens. The judge, in his opinion, cited a dozen instances of it happening across the country. So she was venting. And she also said, by the way, that the ruling neutered her ability to investigate Powell. It actually doesn't. A lot of the information she was seeking by that subpoena is publicly available. She could get it off the Fed's website. And B, if she's as great a man, she loves to sing her praises as a prosecutor. I'm, the toughest, meanest, badass. I invented child abuse prosecutions. I mean, you could still put a case together. You just can't do it through this particular subpoena. So, I don't know if she's auditioning for something there or just trying to get in the spotlight, but that was a wild moment.
Yeah, I actually thought Cecily Strong would have been brought back to spoof that, but they didn't do it. Last quick question. Give me your thoughts on the Meta lawsuits, the settlements.
Oh, yeah.
And how consequential or not do you think they are going forward?
This is a huge deal. And you've heard a lot of people say it's reminiscent of the tobacco lawsuits. I think there's a good amount of validity to that. Now, tobacco is a little different because you can prove that causal link, right? Smoked for 30 years, got lung cancer. Here it's a little dicier, right? Because, okay, the child in the Meta lawsuit, who's I don't think a child anymore, but she has, had mental health issues and depression. She's okay. She was there at the loss. She didn't, she's alive and okay. But, there's a lot of factors that go into mental health problems. And it's much harder to prove that this social media caused that in a legal causation way. The other thing is virtually everyone's on some form of social media, and it bums out virtually all of us to some extent. But if I'm just thinking about this pragmatically as the companies, I mean, I know they have endless billions of dollars, but I don't see where these lawsuits end. You're going to have individual users can bring suits like we've seen. You're going to see class actions of large groups coming together. You're going to see lawsuits from state AGs. And I don't know whether they're going to take the posture of it's cheaper to just settle and pay these things to go away, or we're going to force you to take us to trial. But then we're going to see massive verdicts. The verdict in the California case was only $6 million total, but the other case, the New Mexico case, was $375 million. So look,
still a drop in the bucket for.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, but you get 8 of them, 10 of them, 12. So
do you think this California case, because it was just a few $1 million, like you know that a lot of these cases are contingency cases, and if a law firm knows how much they're going to be spending on these cases, and the payout potentially is $3 million, $4 million, $6 million, will a lot of these cases go forward or not?
That's a great question. It depends how much. It depends how difficult these cases are, right? If they're just being paid off as $3 million settlements, then that's one thing. But yeah, I mean, if you put in a year's worth of work and get a $3 million verdict, I don't think that's a great investment. I'm not really plugged into these PI firms, these personal injury or plaintiffs firms, as we call them. But that may not be the best investment of time and money. But the enterprising lawyers will do what lawyers did during tobacco, which is they will become sort of specialists in that area. They'll round up plaintiffs. They'll bring class actions. I mean, those tobacco lawyers made billions and billions of dollars. So it's interesting. But, I will tell you, I get it. I despise what social media does to children. I think it's been toxic and horrible. But I also think there's a bit of responsibility shifting. I mean, I look at that California case. This was a girl who got addicted, according to her own lawyers, to YouTube when she was 8. I mean, look, I don't want to sound like an 80s
where are the parents?
Reagan person, but where the hell? Would your kid get addicted? No, my kids. I mean, there were plenty of times I had to smack the iPad out of their hands and go, get the hell off the phone. But not when they were 8. I'll tell you that much. Right. And so I do think there's a balancing to be done, but no, I do think these are a big deal. And I do think this is, if I was the general counsel for one of these social media companies, I would be very, very concerned that this could be almost an existential threat. It's just the cost of these lawsuits could eventually become massive to these companies.
Great stuff, Elie. Come back soon.
Thanks, Andy. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right, bud.
This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.